Okay guys, the big episode. This one will mark the biggest change in the history of St. Andros. However, we're not going to be doing the biggest build. We're going to be doing the biggest unbuild. If progressions could go in reverse, then we would go from thriving metropolis to something around small city. Things are going to change, it's going to get really messy, but I reckon that sometimes in order to progress, we first need to go backwards. So I reckon get your final looks of the current state of St. Andros, because I am going to be making some pretty extreme changes down here. Not just to the look of it all, but also to the population, the way it functions, the structure, the entirety of St. Andros is going to change, because as you can see, there is a pretty big difference between Pubella and Smog Island, and then the absolute dumping ground that is the heart and center of St. Andros. It is just a bit of a sad sight down here, which is why I am really keen to change everything. Well, not exactly everything. We do have a couple of historical elements down here that are very important for this city, and it just wouldn't be right if we removed them or even changed their location, even if it's going to be somewhat tricky to figure out how on earth we're going to make it work. So first of all, we do have Drew House, which we cannot move, we cannot change, he must remain right here. We've also got this historical gravesite, we cannot remove this or change its location, as well as our very mysterious stone head. No one knows where it came from, no one knows who carved it. It's just here. One can only speculate. I just know I'm not touching the thing. And to be honest, I'm gonna keep the majority of all of down here pretty much intact. I will probably switch and change a couple of buildings, ones that don't really fit anymore, or maybe just reduce the size of this, because this is not going to be the main downtown of the city. I'm actually gonna shift it to over here. I think it's going to look a whole lot better in this location, and as you can see, I've already sort of mapped it out with a district, and we do have a couple of buildings just kind of representing what it could potentially slash not really look like. I mean, I have no intention for it to look quite like this, but this is the general idea of where all of it's going to go. So with that in mind, I would like to kind of keep a bit of the main roads down here fairly intact. By the main roads, I mean our old road, which is the very beginning road that we started off the series. I like the way that it kind of turns into these two one-way streets. So I think that works pretty well as it stretches through this center down here and then makes its way over to Airport Island, which I am going to keep intact for now, but this is also on the chopping block. So apart from a couple of main roads, the rest of it has to go. The reason why it all has to go is because I'm going to do some major terrain work and just reshuffle the way that all this looks. So I do need to pretty much wipe out everything else. So I am expecting total chaos. I am expecting mass eviction. I mean, there's no way around it. We already have a whole bunch of people leaving, but this is going to go into the thousands. I am a little bit nervous because I know that this is going to really cause a lot of problems. So I think I need to get a little bit more money in the bank because this is just not going to cut it. And to accelerate our profit, I probably need to increase a bit of the happiness within the city because at the moment, people aren't that happy. We have a lot of high crime, and as you can see as well, our waste management service is pretty poor. So I'm going to make some changes to that, and I'll see you when this looks a whole lot healthier. All right, 30 million should do pretty nicely. Geez, famous last words. We'll see how we go. So I've essentially just started to tax my citizens a little bit more because we are looking at a whole lot of happy citizens, which is lovely. Good mail service, we've got pretty good wealth within the city as well, and I've also improved the crime rate, although I'm looking at it here and it's still kind of high. I've also gone through and added in some extra rubbish tips around the place, so now our junkyard is operating like a tip, which is pretty fun. And I've also, I mean, I'm not proud of this, but there's one over here too. But I'm not proud of it because, I mean, it's just purely to solve a bit of a problem over here, which is our rubbish situation, and as you can see, it is solving it very well. Just joking, there is the same problem. Clearly, the reason why is, well, our traffic is atrocious. So, the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to fix our traffic situation by removing citizens. I do need to take my time with this because as we start to get into some of these areas that have much higher density, we're going to start to see a lot of problems with people leaving the city. And we can already see, yeah, here comes the thousands. So this is what I expect. So I am just going to continue to go through and just remove big blocks of land. I am also not afraid to remove some of these services. It's going to cause problems. I'm kind of all for it. And now I can start to hear my computer really start to kick into gear. The lag is setting in, or is it okay? No, here it comes. Yeah, look at this. As people leave their buildings and flock onto the streets and onto the various public transport options that I have around the city, which is gonna really, oh, I actually deleted one of the subways. Great. Well, perfect time into dollars. Okay, so that did take quite a long time, but we are now at a pretty good stage where I am getting pretty close to start dragging out, or at least start terraforming the land to basically get it to where I want it. But before I get there, we are obviously losing quite a lot of money. We've gone from plus 100,000 to negative 100,000. But because we now have far less people living within the city, like way less, I'm going to remove a couple of services that we just don't need anymore. So goodbye random garbage dump. This next change that I'm going to make might be a little bit controversial, but I have no use for these highways now. I will absolutely drag out highways at a later stage, but I think it's going to be way more realistic if we first establish all the roads, we figure out where the neighborhood's going, and then we can start dragging out bridges and highways that will snake around here. I am considering leaving a segment of this just to kind of show where it once used to sit. I mean, this is one of the very first things that we built when the city first became a city, so I don't know, maybe like a nod to where it was, could even convert it to a bit of a park. I don't know. Just a thought. But it does mean I will have to remove our bridge, but I'm kind of okay with that. And look how bare it is now. That's pretty wild. So we've made some drastic changes, and I think removing the highway was absolutely necessary. It is gonna come back, but I like the idea that we'll get the streets down, we'll get the buildings down, and when the demand is there, then I think it's going to be worthwhile getting in those highways. And I have left the ends of them here, almost like they're under construction. It's about to come, it's about to hit the city, but at the very moment, we do not need it. Now, up here, we do have a neighborhood already established. This is Patronville, which is a neighborhood that I've created during a bunch of live streams that I've done with my patrons and YouTube members. So I am leaving that intact, but I really like the idea that that is already over there, and I do need to figure out how to connect him up to the rest of this. And I'm going to be continuing to figure out where all the neighborhoods are going to sit amongst all this. So rather than just expanding from one point down here, we'll be expanding from multiple areas where I think towns might have once existed. And then, of course, as St. Andros has expanded over time, it is just kind of become the one city. Okay, I know I said terraforming, but I think I'm gonna do just a little bit of downtown layout, just the very, very gentlest of planning first, and then we'll get into some terraforming. And the reason why I am deciding to do this is because I did want to change a bit more of this road layout just so it had a bit more of a bend in it, and I feel like this makes more sense being at a narrow point within the river that's here, so that's why I've done that. But I'm already enjoying this kind of wonkiness going on. I feel like this is more influenced by the landscape, and it kind of gives me a bit of an idea to maybe make a bit more of an unconventional, less grid-like pattern within here. I am continuing to take inspiration from Boston, and I am a big fan of this pretty unconventional grid. It reminds me of Sydney, and I don't know, maybe I'm just a bit influenced by that, but I think this would be a pretty good excuse to encompass a bit of that sort of a layout, especially having a road that kind of hugged this a bit more, and this main road I think is a little bit better established too. So I'm going to continue this road as it continues to snake around here. And this, I know, is dedicated to downtown, but I actually think that this might be nice to do something maybe a bit more historical, maybe a whole bunch of row houses and have a whole bunch of walls that sit along here. That could be quite nice, so I might lean more into that and continue to zone out this sort of an area for our downtown. So I guess in a similar spot to where it was before, I reckon that'll look quite nice. But I reckon we continue and march forward and continue to flesh out around here. Now, I know what you're thinking, $2, this is not terraforming, you doofus. I know this is not terraforming, but the way that I'm gonna do this, and I don't know if this is the fastest option or the best option, but this is just how I like to do it. But basically I am dragging out the roads, and then I'm gonna go and use Move It and do some terraforming. And again, this is probably not gonna be the fastest method because as you can see, Move It is, it's a bit finicky. And in City Skylines 2, it's just, there's a couple of things that are just not quite right. But now that we've got the main roads down, I would like to place down a bit of infrastructure for something a bit different, the train network. So the train network, I am still trying to figure a bit of it out. Like, I know that I would like to have some sort of train line around here, and especially snaking its way into what would have been the old docks. So that is still to come, but in terms of a main train station, I've had my eye on two assets that I think paired together are going to make for a bit more of a unique station. You'll recognize these buildings, but they're some of my all-time favorites. So I'm gonna use the Mediterranean train station, and I've left some space for him right here. Oh, not quite enough space. Remove that, and in fact, that probably makes a bit of sense. I mean, we don't really, I guess we'll have to wait and see, won't we? Because we could actually get a bit of traffic, especially right here, but I will just plop him down, and that is already a mighty fine station, but I'm gonna make some adjustments. I will add an extra 2 stations on it, well, 2 platforms, and then I'll search for the department store. This is part of the German asset pack, and I think that these two together, ooh, I mean, already. We have to make a few adjustments here and there, but I think this is going to work out very nice. In my opinion, that pairs together beautifully. 2 of my all-time favorite assets. I've never placed them down, I've only just eyed them off, but these are truly wonderful. Even the top of this is just so nicely detailed. I don't even know if people sit up here, but I like the fact that this is, well, first of all, this platform is going to support a whole heap of trains. So that is probably all the platforms that I need. And then as people leave the station, they can then go directly into this department store and shop. And, you know, when we actually start getting some businesses in here, I think that'll work beautifully. Now all we need to do is connect him up. And when we finally get some drawbridges, this is going to look super nice. I am taking inspiration from the main station within Boston, and there's a couple of drawbridges down here, and there's a whole bunch of lines just connecting up into this fine point as it crosses the river. I've also dragged out this highway just to get an idea of where he's going to go, but I'm going to leave him disconnected right there. And speaking of disconnected, a metro is disconnected. And I think we might have a bit of space to drag it across here. And that's a fun little interaction between the two lines. We will also have a platform somewhere around here too. This will be a bit of a neighborhood, which I'm sure would appreciate something like that. And I have begun to drag out a line because I'm thinking, I reckon at some point there was probably another train line that went across here. And probably, I mean, you can almost see how the road has been influenced by some old rail infrastructure. You know, that always ends up happening. You find little kinks in the road or odd bits around cities and you go, that's a little bit interesting. I wonder why that was like that. Of course, there was probably a train line down there. And I think that makes a bit of sense because, you know, again, there would be a whole bunch of old walls that would have been connected by some sort of train network, would have threaded its way all the way throughout the city, and with a line already going in this direction, I think that maybe the metro line has maybe occupied a bit of that old infrastructure. So that's just something to think about. Let me know what you think about that, because you can imagine we could actually stretch it all the way through here. So just an idea. And with that, I would like to dive into a time lapse and just smash out a bunch of expansion. We've got a lot more roads to figure out. I want to build a couple of neighborhoods, and I would also like to get down a couple of older buildings. But some of those buildings are quite large, so we'll have to kind of figure out how to weave the city around them. Let's dive into it. As I continue to drag out these roads and think about how the terrain is going to influence all of this, I am also trying to consider these neighborhoods and think about what their purpose was. Why were they established? What sort of identity do they have? Because I do like to think about, you know, trying to inject some sort of identity into these places. It's not just determined by the buildings, but it's also determined by the layout. So we do have this one up on the hillside, which I think is going to be super nice, especially when I place down the cathedral. But I am also working on this other one that's down here, which is going to be influenced and inspired by this one within Boston. I really like this one because it's got this big park out the front of it, which we'll be doing off to the other side of it. But I also really like this avenue that goes down the middle. It is just a really interesting and quite a picturesque little neighborhood. So I wanted to do something fairly similar. But with those two neighborhoods down, at least the layout figured out, the one up on the hill and then the one down on the water's edge, I wanted to then work on the terrain. So again, this is a bit of a convoluted way of doing the terrain. I don't know if this is the best way. It's definitely a lot harder, but I do think that the end result is definitely worth it because you do find the terrain is a little bit more prominent with places like this because I'm able to basically shape it around my road layout. So I'm kind of thinking about both of those aspects of this build as I continue to drag out roads and then shuffle up the nodes here and there. But it is pretty tricky, especially with Move It in its current state. I mean, Move It is a super powerful tool, but it's still not quite where it was in City Skylines 1, which is interesting because there is still like features within this version of it that are far better than the one in City Skylines 1. So something in the middle would be great, but I'm sure there's a lot of limitations with what we can do with this game and the mechanics, and it's definitely still being fleshed out. But I was using Move It quite a lot just to, figure out how all of this is gonna shape the landscape. And you can see where I am thinking about building that park. It is going to be fairly large, and I reckon it's going to look really nice off in the corner alongside both those neighborhoods. After all that, I needed to figure out where some of these larger and historical buildings are going to go, as they are really important. I wanted to make them, at least a couple of them, main features of the city. So figuring out how they fit into the layout is pretty tricky because they are quite big. So I needed to place them down fairly early on. I knew I wanted to place down this cathedral, as this is St. Andros, so we do need a St. Andros cathedral. So where this was going to go needed to be something pretty prominent. I just placed it down next to the park for now, but I'll figure out another spot for it in just a moment. I also wanted to place down a city hall. We just got the main vanilla one and a couple of other ones that do kind of feel sort of similar, at least. You could kind of pretend that they are city halls, but I think I'm just going to go with the vanilla one for now. I am still trying to figure out where that's going to sit. Something that was a bit tricky was I actually needed to get an idea of where this highway was once stretching out, and may potentially go out too. So I ended up just changing the surface for that general path, because wherever that goes, we can't have anything too historical because it would have been demolished for that highway to be built. So that's going to be like a bit of a highway scar. We'll have like remnants of where that highway once sat, and the new highway is going to be in a pretty similar spot too. So that is the general idea of where that's going to go. And then I noticed that there was a pretty fun little interaction with the elevated metro that was now not quite elevated. It was partially elevated, and then it also kind of dug into the ground. I didn't really plan for it to look like this, but this is just one of those aspects of the game that I really enjoy, where something pops up, it's like an accident, but then you kind of get inspired by how it could potentially look. So I figured that maybe we could have a partially sunken and then elevated section, as the terrain is shifting quite a lot around here. So I am trying to figure out how that's going to go into the ground, and it kind of also gave me the idea that maybe this is where the cathedral could also sit. So I am playing around with where it could go, and how I can use the cathedral to kind of cover up some of the ditch where the metro is going into the ground, because it's not quite meant to work like this, but I am doing some trickery just to make it so it is a sunken line. But I like the fact that the cathedral is very much heart and center. It is up on this hill, and it's so prominent within the city. This is exactly what I wanted it to look like, but it did feel a bit out of place. So I decided to go and place down a bunch of the types of row houses that I want around here. I really wanted this to be a bit more of a smaller community, so we're not going to go too tall in terms of the buildings. This is going to be very much a smaller neighborhood and mark the end of, I guess, where the downtown is. But this is going to be a really nice and picturesque place. As you can probably tell, it's turning out to be quite a lovely little neighborhood. But I just wasn't that satisfied with the positioning of the cathedral. It just felt a little out of place, a bit oddly positioned. I don't know, there's just something off about it. I felt like it needed to be more in line with the layout of the downtown. So I decided to save it just in case I made any errors because I didn't know if this was even going to work in the first place. And I ended up just shifting him so that he was in line with where the metro is going underground, and I ended up dragging out another road. So we do have this really nice avenue that is basically in the center of it has this metro line, and I reckon this will look really nice with some gardens and maybe some open grass and some old buildings surrounding it. We're just going to put the finishing touches on this area in the next episode. But then to finish off the time lapse, I'm just going to flesh out the rest of that neighborhood just to get an idea of where some of these buildings could go. And geez Louise, that is a pretty big difference from what it was before to what it is now. Very much out with the old and in with the older. I guess, because we are now rocking a lot more older infrastructure and definitely nothing too modern down here. That's something I didn't really plan to do. I mean, we have a couple of new developments, but yeah, we are pretty much just rocking mostly old buildings, which is kind of fun. Oh, I mean, that's not a totally bulletproof statement right there. You can see a couple of modern ones, but 95% of these buildings I would consider pretty old. So let's have a little gander at some of these stats. We are now increasing our population, which is good. We do have a couple of new developments, one down here and one over here, which we'll have to give a district to in just a moment. And we are just going to continue to bleed money for what I reckon a while, because we have a lot of big infrastructure and not really a big population. And not to mention, we are now going to be struggling with traffic, but that will only last for a little while. We will connect up a couple of things which will ease traffic just a smidge, which will be good. But let's just slow him down and have a little look at some of, well, I guess maybe some of the vistas, because I guess that is sort of the reason why I have spent so much time working on the terrain and the road layout and our cathedral, St. Andros Cathedral. I mean, there's good reason why we spent such a long time working on these things, because I have tried to make sure that everything looks and feels pretty organic in terms of a city. I reckon we could do something really nice in terms of the landscape around here, like especially in terms of the trees that we choose. Like even at the moment, if I even just kind of put them within a line kind of going alongside this road, that is already, I reckon, way nicer. But you can imagine when we do have a nice little staircase, some nice little paths just kind of snaking around this little area, that's going to be such a pretty little spot. And I just got to make sure not to go, well, we're going to go pretty tall in terms of skyscrapers and the downtown, but yeah, we do have to kind of like leave a little bit of a space so we can see how he looks. But that'll be a story for another day. And before we start working on some extra bits and pieces, I will just show you this little neighborhood that I just started to place down, and it is just kind of the bare bones at the very moment, just to get an idea of where some of these buildings can go. There's also quite a bit of variation with all these buildings, but I reckon for the most part, I am pretty happy with the shape of how this is starting to look, and with a whole bunch of trees and just thinking about the roads a little bit better, I reckon that this will look very nice. But of course, it's not all about how it looks, it is also about how it functions. And as you can see, we are not functioning too well. If I look at some of my services, education-wise, that is fine. Fire service-wise, that is just okay. I don't really want anything burning down, so I will place another fire station there. Police, pretty much sorted. And then in terms of parks, it's fine. It's not great, but I mean, they do have the Notre Dame, I should say St. Andros Cathedral, so that is plenty in my books. And plus, in the next episode, we are going to go pretty hard in terms of the services for these guys, so I'm not too fussed about that. But in terms of healthcare, yeah, they've got absolutely nothing. So I reckon just a little clinic just to kind of tie them over is all they really need. In terms of death care, I plan to build a big city cemetery right about here, right next to Patronville. It just feels like a pretty good spot. Being close to the city, I think we should probably just do a little tiny one. You know, usually have these tinier little cemeteries closer to the city when, you know, the city was first established and there wasn't a huge demand for death care. Well, it looks nice, but now I'm thinking about my own mortality. So let's move on to something a little bit happier. Let's move on to some trains, because they're fun, and then also people down here are super struggling. I mean, our roads are super struggling. Look up here, super struggling. So what we need to do is, I reckon we do 2 outside connections to our train station, and see how well this baby functions. I think I'm gonna go a bit wild here and do 2 outside connections. I'm gonna go to this one out here. I'll copy that color set, but I'm pretty sure if I just paste him over here. Okay, I don't know if that's gonna stay the same way. I guess we'll just have to watch and wait. So that's just the one train on the one network going to the one outside connection. I'm gonna set up one more and I'm gonna send it to a different outside connection. I reckon we also connect up another service a little bit better. I still have no idea where I'm gonna be building this subway yard, but I reckon just for the time being, and this could be a permanent spot, I will put him out towards Patronville, and I don't know, that could be permanent, it could just be temporary. At this very moment, it is just to connect him up. I've gone for the medium version. This is all part of Tigan's infrastructure mod, and again, I reckon I might even keep it this way because that is quite a nice little depot. So just a bit of temporary infrastructure as I connect him up to some more permanent infrastructure for our subway line. What I will do is I'm actually gonna add an extra station because we do have this line out this way, so it would make some sense if we actually connect up this little neighborhood. And on top of the road is exactly where I want it to be. And I'm just gonna keep this extremely simple for now because I plan to come back down here and connect it up in a much better sense, but I am just gonna do the one line for now, and we'll choose up some vehicles, maybe just put 2 on the line because otherwise you put too many, you will end up holding up a lot of traffic, and I'd be curious to see how many people end up using it because we don't have a huge amount of people living out this way. Let's be through a couple of days and see whether or not people do end up moving in and whether or not we see any sort of a difference down here. Well, some time has passed, but I can't say a huge amount has changed. We've got a small amount of ridership on most of the subway network. Unfortunately, I have still not connected up this guy to a road or any sort of pathway, so no one is currently using it. I'm gonna try something in just a moment, but in terms of like the ridership on everything else, it is just okay. I mean, not a huge amount of people, but I guess that's to be expected. And this train arrived with 14 people and it's leaving with 10, so we are nowhere near capacity. So there is definitely room for improvement down here. And again, I reckon it's just mostly due to the fact that we just don't really have a huge amount of places for people to buy up. And we do have a lot of demand for it. So that is going to be something that I think is going to make some really big changes in the next episode. But there are 2 more things that I want to do. First of all, I would like to connect this guy up. And this is what I like about this game. Sometimes you can cause problems and then it leads to creative solutions. Something that I wouldn't have thought about doing before. And I say that, but this might not even fix the problem. What if we had underground parking? Now that would solve 2 problems. A lack of parking. I mean, we do have some empty spots here, but I think we all know that at some stage it's going to get pretty hectic. Can I drag it here? Is that, nope, that didn't fix it. Does it need to be here? Okay, so that's fixed that problem. Okay, we're starting to get a bit technical here, but it's kind of working. Essentially, it goes into a tunnel here, like the smallest tunnel, and then pokes back up to ground level, but you can't see it, and connects up to our subway. Now, that is pretty fun. And people are on the platform, which is great. That means it is all connected. I now just need to commit to the custom parking garage underneath. And I think I've got some roads that do allow for, yep, these guys. This could work pretty well, but I don't know if they're actually connected to anything. So I'm just gonna drag this out and hope for the best, because there is a road under here and I have dropped him into the ground at -20, but I don't know if that's actually connected. So I might just have to come back to that, because also there's nothing really out here either. So there's not really any point for people to actually use that as a parking garage, but for sure, when we do finally get something else around here, this will be, I reckon, pretty popular. The last thing I want to do is map out a bit of the waterfront. As I've figured out a lot of the road network and where some of the communities are going to go, I would like to figure out how the waterways have been also influenced by these roads, as I can imagine that a lot of these roads are probably established as the wharves and the industry that once sat here. And I think before this was a subway, I reckon that this was probably a train line going down to the same area. So, working with that idea, I'm going to extend out our land a bit more just to play around with that idea. There's our stone head, which I do have to be a bit careful about. So I am going to just go pretty close to where he sits. I mean, let's not disrupt the gods too much. This beach now feels pretty out of place, so I'm going to remove that, and I reckon we could probably remove some of these trees. I am disrupting things a lot, but it all feels very outdated and kind of unrealistic at this point. And I think that just gives you a pretty vague idea of how I'm going to expand out that waterfront. But I did want to make this a bit larger, as if it was some sort of industrial complex and, you know, had some sort of wharves attached to it. And the rail lines used to go down this way too, so you can sort of see where that path is. But I reckon we could probably include some sort of remnants down here as well, which I think would be really nice. I have been as careful as possible with our head, but oh, now he's floating. Interesting. But I do admit I'm not super happy with just it kind of sitting there very randomly. I can imagine there being some sort of apartment block that is, you know, sitting here now, or maybe like a museum, or well, actually a museum might be kind of fun. So if you've got some ideas, let me know. But this is going to be a bit of a feature of this little area. Now that I say museum, I actually think we probably do stick some sort of museum here and turn all this into a bit of a park, which we already kind of have here. So just a couple of ideas. Something I did notice is that people are now, they've like lost all hope with this road, and they're now trying to get into the city via this road, and it's also still miserable. So I need to stop all this. I need to wrap up this episode, and I need to tackle our highway. But guys, thanks for watching this one. Big shout outs to you all. I do really appreciate it. I am really enjoying building this downtown and figuring out the new layout, and I have obviously got tons of ideas. I really can't wait to get back into it all, so I'm going to do that right now. But before I do, I want to give a big shout out to my beloved patrons and YouTube members for making videos like this possible. Gary Key, Jess, Dozers Balsas, Frazee, Poop, Beck Naguin, Scott Stafford, Biz Quinn, Edward Kim, Bart, James Lester, Justin Sadunek, and Andy Jones. Cheers, legends. See you on the next one. Bye.